Everyone has moments in life they can't just stop thinking about. They can be embarrassing things, like that one time you face planted in front of a group of teenagers, or something amazing like the first time you hosted your family for the holidays. And on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, hosted by me, Keke Palmer, and presented by BMW, we know to savor the good memories and let go of the bad. And one thing everyone remembers fondly is their first time behind the wheel of a BMW. So come join me and BMW this summer as we explore pop culture moments and topics you just can't stop thinking about on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, sponsored by BMW, the ultimate driving machine.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
In each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Meg Murray. She's a writer and editor whose essays and film criticism can be found all over the internet. Her editing debut, The Book of Queer States horror anthology, just came out. Congratulations, Meg!
Thank you.
And thanks for being on the show. Welcome.
I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about my trauma with you.
I
love
cannot
it.
wait. I cannot wait to dig into this movie. But before we do get there, let's take it back to the very beginning. How did you get introduced to horror?
Yeah, I've loved horror since I was a little kid. My grandmother introduced me to horror with movies like Silence of the Lambs and Blade and Interview with the Vampire. She was really, really into vampires, still is. Like her latest foray into vampirism was Midnight Mass, which she loved. So it's an ongoing conversation. So yeah, that's where the love of horror started. But earlier than that, like maybe before I was 10, I would say I was really, really scared of horror movies. I think most kids are. So it was kind of an evolution from the time I was like small to the time I was like 10, 11 when I started like really getting into them.
What was your first horror movie?
Okay, the first one that I remember seeing first would be Alien. It came on TV when I was like 5 years old. I remember watching it and it terrified me because I was so scared for the cat. Like that's the thing I was focused on because I loved cats. So it was almost unbearable to watch because there was a cat in it.
And the cat gets left a couple times and it's like, poor kitty, Jonesy. Yeah.
Like I have flashbacks of that cat being in like a vent or something. It's been a long time since I saw it, but like running through a vent and like my 5-year-old mind just being like, please, dear God, don't let the alien get it.
Oh man, 5 years old though, seeing Alien, that's pretty wild. Even if it was on television, so it might have been edited down, that's still pretty wild.
Yeah, I'm pretty forthcoming with the fact that I had like no parental supervision whatsoever. My dad was actually like even as a small child, he was like, "Oh my God, you've got to see this." I'm like 5 years old. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll watch it.
My dad was very similar. Was like, "Hey, watch this," and I'm like, "Cool." I'm like a grown up.
Yeah. I'm watching grown-up movies. Yay!
I'm so cool.
Amazing.
And like, oh no, my brain is absolutely destroyed.
and thus Scarred for Life was born.
And thus Scarred for Life was born. So aside from the movie that we're talking about today, what were some other movies that really freaked you out as a kid?
So many. The Blair Witch Project was a big one. And that was because my mom was like, I was like 8 or 9. She was like, if you don't watch this movie, you're a chicken. And I was like, okay.
Jesus Christ.
Listen, my parents had me when they were very young. So they just,
okay.
They were young people in their 20s.
Wait, how old were your parents when they had you?
My mom was 19 and my dad was 22.
Okay, cool. My parents are similar. My mom was 20 and my dad was 22.
Yeah, so like they were in their 20s when they were doing this, which, you know, like they were younger than me.
Like I can't even imagine. Like I have friends who are having kids or like who had kids and have multiple children at my age of 28, and I'm like, what in the fuck? Like I don't understand.
Yeah,
wild.
Yeah.
Anyway, derailing from the movies you watched as a kid.
Well, so Blair Witch Project, I was told I was a chicken if I didn't watch it, so I watched it. And I grew up in Arkansas where it's pretty common for you to just kind of like put up a tent in the backyard and sleep out there, or to just like you go camping every weekend because it's like a really cheap, almost free thing to do. And so that scarred me for sure because we were always in this tent and I would be like up at night in the tent, like watching the sides of it. Like, is it moving? Is it, cause you know, the part where it's like, they are like battering the sides of the tent.
Oh yes. My worst nightmare. That's still, I don't go camping a lot, but whenever I do go camping, I fall asleep thinking about that. It's horrible.
I haven't been camping in like many years. And I think that Blair Witch Project is part of the reason why even now.
We don't need to go camping. Camping it's fine. Who needs to go camping anyway?
My idea of camping is staying at like a Motel 6 or something.
Well, similar. It's very similar. You just have a little bit more protection from the witch that's after you in the woods.
Exactly.
So you were scared as a kid watching horror films, but did you have any horror favorites from that early age?
Let me think about that. Like, there were horror type things that I really liked. Like, I really liked werewolf stories. I wasn't scared of werewolves. I loved werewolves. Do you guys remember that show, Big Wolf on Campus? It was like a TV
Oh my god,
show.
Yes!
It came on like ABC Family or something, but it was about this like, high school kid that turns in. It's like Teen Wolf before Teen Wolf. And yeah, I was obsessed with that show. I also loved Buffy. Weirdly enough, sometimes I wasn't allowed to watch it because like the witchcraft in it. I mean, I was from the Bible Belt, so it was like, you can't be watching that. But I watched a lot of that, and I got the Buffy the Vampire Slayer magazines and stuff. So,
oh my god,
yeah.
So you said you were around like 11 or 12 when you started watching horror movies and enjoying them.
Yeah.
So do you remember like what movie you saw that like really got you to start enjoying horror movies?
I think it was Blade. Like, I think
Hell yeah, it was Blade. Oh my god, incredible choice. Or not choice, but yeah, that's incredible.
I was really into, like, the sexuality of the vampires in Blade. Like, as a child, that was, like, I was like, oh, this is, like, sexy, and I think I'm kind of, like, discovering my sexuality through this right now. Because all of the vampires were so hot. Like, the evil vampires were
Stephen
so
Dorff.
hot.
Stephen Dorff.
Hot.
I was obsessed with Deacon Frost like you wouldn't believe.
Same.
I was like, this pasty-ass white man is like...
It's the man of my dreams.
Man of my dreams.
Oh, man. I'm looking back at some of the pictures. That era with his, like, bedhead hair and just, like...
Oh,
he's
my
so
god.
white. Just so white.
Just so white. And, like, the leather. Yeah, it was great. And then Blade himself was a badass. Like, I wanted to fight like Blade, but I also kind of wanted to look like Deacon Frost.
Hell yeah. It's a great combo.
Yeah. Like, I get crushes on these horror, like, icons where I'm just like, do I want to be this or do I want to have sex with this? I can't decide.
Or both. Why not both?
Yeah, why not both?
Oh, well, now I want to watch Blade.
I know. It's been so long since I've watched those films.
Like, let's just pause this and watch Blade, and then we'll come back.
There you go.
Bye, guys. We have to go watch Blade.
Okay, so transitioning to being as an adult, do you find yourself getting scared of movies at all like you did as a kid, or are you kind of jaded from them now?
I don't really get scared because I feel like I'm looking at it with a different lens now. Like, every time I watch a movie, it's through like this critical lens where I'm just like, what am I getting from this? What am I feeling from this? Like, is there a message? Which I know there's like all this discourse about that, but that's just kind of how my brain works. But I can say that I saw Hereditary in an empty theater on the day that it came out. It was like a matinee showing in the middle of the day. I was the only one in a huge theater. And I was genuinely terrified. Like, I was genuinely so scared because I was in this huge space by myself where like anything could happen. That's the last time I was like really scared from a horror movie.
Take a shot, listeners. That movie comes up a lot. That one or Terrified.
Oh, alone by yourself in a big theater too. That sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, like I mean, I think it's an unsettling movie just on its own, but I don't think I would have been, because I rewatched it at home and I was like, this isn't as scary as I remembered it. But I was in like this giant dark theater. I was like, oh, Toni Collette is just going to come climbing on the wall at me. Like, I just know it.
Just skittering down the wall with blood coming out of her neck. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. There's nothing scary about that.
Not even a little bit. But so now, as an adult, what draws you to the horror genre?
Always start out with because I feel like that's a good way to start. I really just love trying to see what I can get out of a piece of someone else's art. I like to read between the lines of what people are trying to say. And sometimes they're not trying to say anything, but sometimes there's a deeper message that's about like who they are as a person, which I feel like when I write horror and when I explore the genre, I'm kind of leaving clues as to like who I am, what I've been through, and I try to see if I can get those like little nuggets out of horror. So it's kind of like, it's fun and revealing and helps me feel connected to the person that made it. Yeah, so I think that's kind of how I look at it now. I watch a ton of horror movies like that, you know, probably don't have a message like that, but I like to see if I can make it about me because because that's what's fun, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And actually, so I meant to ask this before we started talking about what, like, your more contemporary horror stuff, but did you also read a lot of horror when you were younger? Because you write a lot of horror fiction. So did you read a lot of horror when you were younger?
Yeah, I read a ton of horror. I was that kid. I distinctly remember that there was this series of books that were for kids that was like a spin-off of The Sixth Sense. It was like continuations of like the little kid solving like mysteries.
Really?
I read those books. I was obsessed with them.
I did not know that was a thing.
Yeah. I didn't either.
They were like little Scholastic book fairs, book fair things, The Sixth Sense.
Scholastic Book Fair. Wow.
Yeah.
The best time of the year.
The best time.
And I read Anne Rice and Stephen King, of course. I read a lot of that. Of course, I read Goosebumps. I read... what else did I read? I read a lot of different things, but I've only really gotten into writing horror fiction in the past year, I would say.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like a relatively new development where I was like, I kind of want to see if I can do this thing that other people are doing that I really love, you know? We'll see how it goes.
Well, so speaking of which, you also are an editor, and your debut editing piece just came out, The Book of Queer Saints. Can you tell us a little bit about that book and what our listeners can look forward to in it?
The book is 13 original stories by queer horror writers that kind of was born of this idea of like, you know, what is good and bad representation for queer people. It came about because I was witnessing like some close friends even being bullied for the kind of horror fiction they were writing, kind of other queer people saying this is bad queer representation. And there were a lot of assumptions being made about how they identify, like, with their gender and their sexuality. And I was witnessing this kind of like fallout of like people having to come out before they were ready and things like that, just because the internet said so, or the internet, you know, was jumping on them and just forcing them out before they're ready. So as a response, I decided that I would make this book where we lean really, really hard into some of the more transgressive elements of queer fiction, and really lean hard into queer villains, specifically imperfect queer characters who do bad things, and kind of make a statement about how that is part of freedom as well. It's good to have your, whatever it's called, Love, Simon or whatever on the big screen. Like, it's cool to have that, and that's good for kids growing up. But for a lot of us, we didn't have that. Like, we had sort of like an underground understanding of queer culture. And I think that comes out in the horror fiction that people our age are writing, and just kind of like bridging that disconnect between the generations. Like, no, it's okay. Part of freedom is being able to be bad too.
I love hearing you say that, because it's kind of like I find myself somewhere being pulled in the middle, where it's like I'm glad also that you brought up like Love, Simon, or the Hulu show like Love, Victor. That I really enjoy as a 41-year-old. I love watching it because, again, like you said, it's not content I had when I grew up. My content, the queer characters are either like made fun of or they were like subtext, right? So like, I think there's like a push in some queer communities to like get that more like mainstream recognition that is like the Love, Simons and the big movie that Billy Eichner is doing later this year, where he's like, it's like a romantic comedy. It's like going to be the first romantic comedy between gay men on like from big, you know, studio produced type like thing. And so there's that. And I think that's great. But then I also do think that there's a lot of like, especially from my generation when I was growing up through it, a lot of that avant-garde, a lot of that, you know, underground type horror stuff that it was going on. A lot of it in like the 80s, that kind of pop, that kind of punk like aesthetic that was going on, and that sort of like fuck you and mentality that was going on. Whereas you had like Pride, and then you had like these other people that were like, no, fuck that. We don't want to conform to heteronormativity, that kind of stuff. And I think that's something that I'm starting to see like a more renaissance with, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's this belief. I see it a lot. I mean, it's from everywhere, but also in the horror community, where you think things have to be one or the other all the time. Like, there's the discourse about, should horror movies be horror for horror's sake, or should they say something bigger, like that elevated horror versus not elevated horror, whatever. And it's like, why can't things just exist and it be both? And I feel the same way about queer rep. Like, we should be able to have all of it. You know, like we shouldn't have to choose between one or the other. And I think one point that one of the authors in the book made during another interview, Haley Piper, she said that like no amount of sanitizing yourself is going to make straight people like you. Like, no amount of representation that conforms to the kinds of like high school love stories that straight folks like is going to make people see you as a human being. And I think that that's part of the pushback against queer villains in horror, is that they're like, we don't want people to see us this way. But it's like, probably those people aren't going to read it anyway. So it's like, you're reading it because you're a queer person, but like, you know, it's not for them. It's made for queer people by queer people.
Yeah. And I think that's the important distinction, right? Because I do think that if I were to watch a movie that was made by a straight person that had like really bad queer representation in it, I would feel one thing. But like if it's being made by the queer community, I honestly think we have seen ourselves as both like the other. We've seen ourselves as invisible. We've seen ourselves as like literally the monster. as well as figuratively the monster. And now I do like that we are able to kind of play with that expectation and make characters that aren't just like, we are the best, we're wonderful. No, you're just as fucked up as the rest of people, you know? And
Yeah.
I saw that a lot. Like I recently, and I know he's one of the authors that contributed to this book, but Eric LaRocca, some of his, we had just recently talked with him, and we had talked about his,
Things have gotten worse since we last spoke. Yeah.
yes, we just talked to him about that book and about, you know, because the queer characters in there aren't necessarily the best, you know, people. And so there's like complications, and there's, you know, I think that is, I love that we're finally at a stage where we can have that, and we can have characters that aren't just one side of representation. You know what I mean?
And like we finally have villains that we can say are queer villains without kind of reading between the lines.
Yeah, they're unabashedly queer, and they're not villains because they're queer. They're villains who happen to be queer.
Exactly. So how did you like really get started in your writing and started realizing you wanted to write about horror?
Well, I mean, does it count to be like a little like 12-year-old writing yourself into werewolf stories?
Yes, it does. I wrote myself into Harry Potter. I know before all of these horrible things happened, I wrote myself into all that stuff when I was younger. That's how I got started writing too.
Yeah, definitely like fan fiction, I guess I would say. Like I wasn't like fan fiction. I wasn't a fan fiction writer. But if something came like if I wanted more of something, then I would seek out fan fiction, specifically the queer fan fiction. So
hell yeah.
I was like, I need more of this, and I need it to be gay, please.
Oh, but fan fiction is like, I know people always laugh about fan fiction, but I feel like fan fiction gave so many of us an outlet when we were like young and on the internet and like didn't have access, not even on the internet, but like didn't have access to things that we really wanted. And you found a little bit of a community on the online.
Yeah, I didn't write fan fiction so much, but I did role playing games online where where you like choose an existing character like Vampire Willow or something, you know, from Buffy, and then you play as that character. I did stuff like that a lot, and kind of
cool.
realized through writing those characters that maybe I could actually write a book about evil characters, which I haven't done yet, but that's next on the agenda.
Well, speaking of next on the agenda, I did see on Twitter that you recently posted about a queer horror novel, An Experiment in Community, that is going to be launching on Kickstarter. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that? When is that going to launch on Kickstarter? Can you say that yet?
Yeah, it's going to launch on May 23rd.
Okay.
And
almost my birthday.
My birthday is May 14th. So I chose
your birthday is the day after my fiance's. Wow.
Look at this. Are we all like Tauruses?
No, I'm a Gemini. He's a Taurus.
All right. Just kidding.
That's about the response I usually get. Yeah, you used to say in your corner, Capricorn.
Wow.
I don't know what that means. It just sounds, I don't know what that means. I don't know what any of that means, but anyway.
Wait, was I talking about something?
The queer
yes,
horror
the May
novel,
14th, the release
Community.
of your horror. I'm
no,
so
May
sorry.
14th is my 30th birthday.
It's your birthday.
May 23rd is the launch of the Kickstarter. So essentially, I'm crowdfunding a writing advance, trying to see how viable it is to be an indie horror author when you have virtually no money. So I'm trying to encourage people to kind of step away from traditional publishing and also make a living from indie horror publishing. So I'm trying to see if there's a way for folks to do that, essentially.
Yeah. So
it's not just about the book, but people who donate to the campaign will also get pretty much bi-monthly updates on the process of writing a first horror novel, including like the books I'm reading, the software I'm using, like character sheets, plot, like maps, things like that, so that people can kind of see an inside look into what the process is like, also how my mind is working through all of this stuff. And hopefully it'll be something inspiring for other writers to decide like, hey, I want to write my first novel. And now I kind of have a map of how to do that.
Cool. That's so cool. Well, May, we have talked about your horror history and your horror work, but what movie did you bring with you today for us to talk about?
I have brought the wonderful 1976 film Grizzly.
Yes, you have. So for the uninitiated, Grizzly is all about an 18-foot tall grizzly bear who terrorizes a state park, which why? Jesus. Oh my God. In Grizzly, an 18-foot tall grizzly bear terrorizes a state park, leaving it up to a park ranger to save the day. Da, 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 da.
Boy. All right, I have a lot of questions about this because honestly, my note was full of what with when I was taking notes watching this movie. But I got to know. Take us back to the beginning. How did you see this movie? When did you see it? What about it scared you? Give us your horror story.
So it all begins. I was 7 or 8 years old.
Was it a stormy night?
It was a stormy night. No, it was daylight. I actually remember this. Like, I was literally scarred by this, guys. It was during the day, popped in the VHS. My stepmother had gotten it from like a yard sale or something.
Okay.
The VHS cassette tape, because you could find those for like a buck or whatever. And she saw it and was like, okay, I'll get this. This is $1. She brings it home, gives it to me. And I pop it in, and I turned it off at the moment where the like lead actress falls into a puddle of blood, and like it goes up to her forearms. I turned it off after that because I was like, I don't think that I should be watching this, and also I'm terrified. So I turned it off after that, and I didn't watch any more of it until Wednesday when I watched it in full.
Oh, wow.
No way. Are you serious?
And so this movie has haunted me for literally over 20 years of my life.
Holy shit.
Wow. So what'd you think?
Well, okay, but before we do, I do have a question. So, because you had said that you had watched Blair Witch and, you know, the whole camping aspect because you were camped out in your yard. Did this also kind of terrify you because the first kill is in a tent or like people around a tent?
Well, there are bears in Arkansas. And,
okay.
And so I was really scared of going camping, and you're always taught to like hang your trash like high up in a tree and to put your food in your car so that bears won't come around at night. And so I was terrified because I was certain that I was going to be mauled by an impossibly large bear.
Hell yeah.
That's a real fear, though. I'm going to be honest with you. That is a fear of mine, and I'm not scared. Grizzly didn't scare me. Bears are huge.
Like it definitely doesn't scare me now. I'll say that. But like as a child, I was very scared of, you know, what if you're walking through the woods and you fall into a puddle of blood and then you come across 2 maimed women.
I think about that all the time. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I still think about that, and it's because of Grizzly.
That's amazing. You know, it's funny because I grew up in the 80s, and in the 80s, like that's when I was like a little kid, and I remember I lived in Alaska at the time, and I remember going to the video store and seeing this VHS box. And I always picked it up. My parents would never let me watch it. I don't know why. My parents are very weird. It was like a roll of the dice whether I was going to be allowed to watch a horror movie or not. But I remember picking up this box, and the cover of it like really just grabbed me. And the poster art is by the kind of legendary comic artist Neil Adams, who did a lot of work for like DC and Marvel and stuff. And I remember just being like enamored with that box and being like, wow, this movie is going to be great. Maybe I'll be able to watch it one day. But I never did. But I did. I was scared of bears because when living in Alaska, we lived up our neighborhood, like our backyard kind of faced a a wilderness, and I would go out there and I would just play in the wilderness all day because it's like in the 80s and kids just sort of like left home and fled and they came back at night, you know. But my night would be going out playing in the woods where there are moose and there are bears. And there was one time where we were kept after school, elementary school, because there was a bear in the playground. So they had to keep us indoors until they could shoo the bear away. So that was like a very valid fear. And I remember the poster of the bear, and he's like stretched out and his arms are like cowering over, of course, a woman, because, you know, it's that kind of push and pull between, oh my God, it's a virginal woman on the cover and there's this giant bear that's going to destroy her. But like, that's what I remember seeing as a kid. And
can we also talk about how that woman isn't even in the movie? That's just like a random, like, blonde woman with big breasts.
Yes.
Yeah. Fine. It's so weird.
But I'm glad that you mentioned the cover art, because when I went to my stepmother who bought it, I was like, this is terrifying. And she was like, oh, I thought it was a friendly bear. Excuse me?
Shut up. What?
Did you not look at the cover?
I thought it was a friendly bear.
Like, if you're listening to this, I need you to go look at the cover and tell me what kind of excuse that was.
Valid.
What? I thought it was a friendly. I'm going to start. Wow.
She was. So my villain origin story is that I did have like a very abusive stepmother. So she was kind of a, what's the word? Like compulsive liar. So I feel like it might not have, like she might have even wanted to scare me. Who knows? But the fact remains that it is, if you look at the cover art, it is absolutely bonkers statement.
There's nothing on that cover that says this is like, Smokey or what's his name, Yogi Bear. There's
Smokey the Bear, Yogi Bear.
There's no Smokey or Yogi on the front cover of this. No.
Not even a little bit. Like, it looks like the Jaws poster.
Yeah, it was part. So Jaws came out the year before, and I'm fairly certain that it was just part of that, like, oh, so they did like a giant scary shark. So we're going to see how many animals, like giant scary animal movies we can make and kind of ride the wave of that.
It was. Oh, yes. It absolutely was.
Like, Jaws is like such an incredible movie. And then you watch Grizzly. The effects are like the girl gets mauled by a bear and they put strips of bacon on her face to make it look like she was clawed.
Listen, some of the blood in this is like the worst blood I've seen, like up to and almost including CGI blood that is popular now. It's like right at that line of like, this is literally they smeared ketchup on someone's face. Like that is the kind of effects that we are getting out of this film.
Yeah, they were definitely using kitchen items. Like the girl who gets mauled in the cabin, that had to have been bacon on her face. Like, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Like, I looked at it more than once and I'm like, that's bacon.
I love it.
Sometimes you just gotta cut corners somewhere.
Of course. But yes, so this was absolutely one of those Jaws ripoffs, because they were hugely popular in the late 70s and into the 80s as like more Jaws movies got released and were racking up money. Like, this was like because even within the first like 3 years of Jaws' release, you had stuff like Mako, the Jaws of Death, Tintorera, Piranha, Orca. All of those came out within like 3 years after that movie's release. And then you also have Grizzly, which, to be honest, this is like a plot point by plot point almost remake of Jaws, except it has like a giant grizzly and it's nowhere near as classic.
Yeah, they've put it in a different setting, but it has the exact same elements of like this money hungry like authority figure who's like, no, we're gonna let them camp, and then they keep getting torn apart. Also, the body count is not as high as Jaws, because the bear works slower.
He's a very slow creature, you know. He's hungry, but he doesn't eat anything. So the line where he's like, the bear likes women, is like, we have that in common. Yes.
And then after that line, the bear starts killing men too, even though up until that point he'd only killed women. I was just like, what's happening?
I literally made a note where it's like, why are all the victims women? And then, of course, that it was like right after that he makes the comment about like, oh gosh, what? He likes women and keeps moving. And the helicopter guy's like, I like trolling too. And I'm like, what? Okay, what is this dialogue?
But this whole movie is so misogynistic. And, like, you know, look, I understand. It's 76. I understand. But, like, this just opens up with, like, a daughter trying to help her dad. They're like, women shouldn't be helping their fathers. Your father can run his own hotel. And I'm like, who are any of you? And she's like, I've only known you for a few weeks, but you are a woman. Let your father do it. That's a man's job. And I was like, do you guys barely know each other? Like, what is happening?
The dialogue between Kelly, the park ranger, and Allison, the old man's daughter, is it's so bad. It's perfect. It's like, Kelly, the problem is you're spoiled. And then Allison replies, I don't feel spoiled. I feel needed. And then he's like, I think your father can handle his end. It's yours you should be worried about. And she's like, somehow I always end up getting it together. I'm like, what is this? What is this? The script feels like someone, you know, one of the popular things that's like really big right now is someone taking like one of those AI story generator bots and then feeding it scripts of things and then seeing what it's going to spit out. I feel like someone did that like back in the 70s, like someone magically created this AI story generator and was like, let's toss in Jaws and toss in all of these other like animal attack scripts and then see what it comes up, because the dialogue makes absolutely no sense in here.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Agreed. There were parts of it where I was kind of like zoning out because I was like, I feel like it would be a great movie to watch like in a crowded theater of people who know that it's just ridiculous. That's the only time that you should really watch it.
It's a good drinking movie.
This would absolutely be a good drinking movie. Okay, the first attack. Let's get back to on this very first attack sequence where the two women are walking back to camp and they're having the most inane conversation. Like, do you guys know the idea of like rhubarb, peas, and carrots? Have you ever heard of that saying? So on set, when people want to have like background dialogue where you're not going to hear what they're saying, but you want them to look like they're having a conversation, that's what they tell you to say is like rhubarb, peas and carrots, because it looks like you're having a conversation.
Oh, interesting.
That is what it feels like they're actually doing, except they're actually having an actual conversation. But it is as inane as background stuff that should have been like in the background, but it's brought to the front. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then Mary Beth, you made a note about the way that she dies and the scream.
So this entire attack sequence is very much like Jaws, like beat for beat, from the music that like swells up to, I mean, like obviously it's two women and it's not at the beach, but still like it has those beat for beat things with Jaws. And then one of the women is killed and lets out this like, like it's not like a scream, it's like her like kind of guttural reaction, and it just starts echoing, and they echo it multiple times, just like
It sounds like some DJ is gonna make a music track out of it, like you know, it's like they were trying to make like a song out of it almost.
Well, and I immediately I already knew, but at that point I was like, oh, this is just gonna be like an insane ride that like is just full of these weird decisions and like all I could think about in this movie was the music and how it's like very weirdly, I don't know if patriotic is the right word, but like in the opening sequence when we have the opening cards and it's these beautiful shots of the mountains, and after I think one of the rangers goes, this is perfect America country, or something about like it being beautiful, like this is what America is. And they have this like cheerful music that almost sounds like something out of like a TV land show, like Leave It to Beaver or something. And that continues throughout, which I was like, is this a purposeful thing to like contrast with the violence, or am I just trying to make this make sense in my horror academic brain?
Yeah, I noticed that too, where it's like da da da, like it's like so lovely. It's so
yeah,
lovely.
Exactly.
And then you're like, what kind of movie is this? Is because it starts to feel kind of like an adventure movie, and you're like, okay, is this like an action adventure type movie? And then maulings begin to happen, and in between the maulings you have the same track of like lovely music as they're like going about the woods. I'm like, that was certainly a choice.
And then they also have music that sounds like it's got like a theremin, so it sounds like alien abduction music sometimes too. And I was like, wait, what? It's just like, tonally this movie is such a fucking mess. Like, from every part of this movie that you could apply the word tone to, it's off. Like, it's just off.
Yeah, so that opening scene where the pilot, who later becomes like one of the three main characters in this, and you're right, the music is patriotic, the music is talking about that, but I love the line because he says, he's talking about how, you know, further encroachment and we're going to destroy this natural beauty. And he's like, and if we can protect it, we just might be able to keep this typical and completely American landscape forever. And I'm like, okay, so that is the start of this movie. And I was like, okay, so are we talking about how like encroachment is going to, you know, cause like animals to attack? Like, is this like an actual like, you know, nature type thing where it's like, yeah, we got to preserve this country because, you know, if we start to, you know, encroach on it, then the animals will come in and, you know, destroy things. I'm like, is that what we're doing here? But it never really follows through with that. Okay.
And like, that's a message I could have gotten behind.
Yeah.
Like, if they had leaned into that, I would have been like, okay, this movie has something to actually say. But
what this movie actually has to say is, it's not bear, it's grizzly. There's a difference. It's my favorite line of the whole movie. Because I pulled it up on my iPad because I was curious, but like, you have the very much like Officer Brody, mayor of town, like a good conversation. And but I absolutely love where like, it's not a bear, it's a grizzly. And like, a bear is a bear. I'm like, are we all fighting about what a bear is right now?
Are we fighting about the nomenclature for a bear?
It's so funny. It's not a bear, it's a grizzly. I'm like,
they're just like arms flying everywhere. And they're like, a bear did that. No, it's a grizzly. And then the viewer is like, could you please get your priorities straight?
Let's stop. No more semantics, guys. Go take care of the thing in the woods.
Right.
I love the conversation that Kelly, the park ranger, has with the doctor. This is again a plot point directly out of Jaws, right, where they're showing like the remains of the person and, you know, explaining like this could have been a shark that did it, you know, that kind of stuff. That's kind of what we get here. The doctor's examining the body under a bloody sheet and he's like, well, it was a big one, all right. And Kelly's telling him, you know, well, bears don't eat humans. And he's like, this one does. Or this one did. And I'm like, what? But we get to the trio of characters. And so we have Kelly, who's obviously the Brody stand-in. You have Scott, who we got to talk about Scott, the nature scientist who's literally wearing Hooper's beanie through most of this movie. Hooper from Jaws.
I didn't think about it either.
I was like, well, I kept going. I was like, okay, so this is obviously the trio from Jaws, because then you also have Stober, the helicopter pilot who's seen shit, who's the stand-in for Quint, who's the one that takes him out on the boat, right? So like you have that dichotomy, or that like connection there. And then I'm looking at Scott, who is introduced wearing a deerskin cape, and he has been.
Sorry,
he has been living with the deer.
Yeah, he's been living amongst the animals of the forest.
And it's because Kelly calls him on his phone that his, like, living with the deer, his harmony that he has created is, like, interrupted, and no longer him with his deerskin cape is no longer being accepted by the deer. What is going on? But he's a weird character in this.
I want that movie.
Yeah,
I want that movie.
Have you seen Grizzly Man? That's basically the real life version of that.
Oh, Grizzly Man. Oh, terrible. Oh my god. But we should talk about the bear himself, because he was a good boy. He was a good boy. Big boy. Teddy, the Kodiak bear, was 11 feet tall and the largest bear in captivity. 11 feet. When he is standing by that helicopter, I was like, nope.
I also love how for like the first hour of the movie, you don't actually see the bear. You just see like the little paws going. And then you see like a glove that looks like a bear paw swiping, and you'll hear like bear roars, but you never actually see the bear. And then there's a person laying with bacon on their face dead.
Yep.
I mean, to be fair, we also get the bear cam, like the killer POV from, I call it the grunt cam because it's basically just like all you hear is the camera and then it's like, like the entire time. I'm like, this is like
so gross.
He's just grunting. So I just named it the grunt cam in my notes. I was like, here's the grunt cam.
Petty cam.
Right. I did think that was, it got old using that, but there was a couple times where it was kind of a cool shot. I really liked how they were simulating the bear standing up on its hind legs and like the camera would move up to be like a tall bear looking down at people. I thought that was actually kind of cool and unique. But yeah, that is, you basically get someone with a gloved hand and a grunt cam for like most of this movie.
I appreciate you, Terry, like really reaching to find the good in this.
I am a sucker for a good killer POV, especially with animals, because I'm like, I think it is really fat. Like, I love it. Because, like, again, the found footage bitch in me is, like, always thinking about that stuff. And it's so cool. Like, oh, cool, we're going to see from the perspective of the animal. Again, it's totally copying off of Jaws. Like, I don't think they're being super original. But it's always just kind of cool to be like, well, at least you guys did try to do something a little different. Like, a little bit more than the typical, like, just on the dudes the whole time. What if they told the whole movie from the perspective of the bear? That would be incredible.
A found footage movie from the bear's perspective. Someone put like a camera on the bear's head to like, track it, and then we just see it on its rampage.
Don't give me that. Don't give me ideas.
My brain was going to, what if it was a mad scientist who built like a robot bear that was killing people, and then you could see through the eyes everything the bear saw. Let's make that. Yeah, let's do that.
That would be cool.
And it's found footage. It's the film that they have extracted from this robot bear.
I gotta go. I have to go write it. Goodbye.
But so, Mary Beth, you did mention the bear that played the bear, Teddy, and I just want to throw out a couple little factoids that I discovered about this bear.
Please they rented him because I love him.
They rented him from the Olympic Game Ranch in Sequim, Washington.
Rented a bear is very funny. Is like the phrase saying I rented a bear, like literally rented a ginormous bear.
The biggest bear that they could possibly find.
And so, but he was kept behind an electric fence at this ranch. And so in order to fool the bear, they apparently used green string and like put it out throughout the filming to keep the bear contained in an area, and use like a kitchen timer, a ticking kitchen clock to like simulate an electric fence so that the bear would not think that it could go outside of the areas, so that they could contain it to specific parts and keep it away from the crew. That's one point. The other point is that the bear wouldn't roar.
I would absolutely shit my pants if I did not actually have a fence keeping this bear contained. If they were like, oh yeah, we're just tricking him. I'm like, I don't want to be here when he finds out that he can go through that piece of string.
Well, they did trick him a few times where they had like different sizes of fish, and they would try to like get like this really large piece of fish to like get him to do stuff, and then they would replace it with a small fish. And then eventually he saw the big fish outside of it, and he went lunging for it. And it was like a big moment of like, oh shit, because this giant bear is lunging for this giant piece of fish. But he wouldn't roar. And so there's this video on YouTube. It is making a video. It was like 7 minutes long, but it had some of the footage of them shooting the bear. And in order to get like the kind of roaring face that he would do, they would throw marshmallows into his mouth and then hold the last one like right outside of his aim, and he just like lean forward like,
oh my god,
trying to get it. And there's actually a little bit of a footage of them holding out this little marshmallow and the bear straining to like try to get it. And that's how they made the faces for the roars.
That's crazy.
That's
like the cutest roar story. Like they're withholding a marshmallow from this bear, and he just really wants that marshmallow.
He just really wanted that marshmallow and the fish. And
that's the face that he's making when he's maiming people and murdering them. It's really, I want that marshmallow face. I'm so glad that I know that now.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I also want to talk about Kittredge, the Mayor Vaughn stand-in who owns the park.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little confused about his plan. Because at one point, first of all, throughout this entire movie, Kelly is kind of, without saying it, he's trying to get him to close the park. And it's really kind of funny because he's like, close down the camp. And he's like, no. And he's like, okay, how about now? He's like, no. Now? No. And then it's finally like, okay, maybe we should shut down the park. But what I love is that Kelly talks to him and basically accuses him of wanting to have all the press here to film all the devastation because he wants a job in Washington. So he's going to let a bear kill a bunch of people so that he can get a job in Washington? In Washington? Is that...
Sounds like most politicians.
Yeah, it's kind of like, to show off, like, I can handle this disaster. Like, I'm handling it very effectively. And that's going to get him a job in Washington. The logic doesn't make a lot of sense because you would assume that people dying in your park bad.
Continuously dying in the park, and it's not getting shut down. But the line that really killed me, and it was like another one of my "what did I just hear" moments, is when Kelly's like, "So you can go to Washington and get one of those nice dark brown plastic offices." Dark brown plastic offices? Again, AI bot.
I'm really convinced that this was all, there was no script and they just told these guys to just kind of like improvise the whole thing. And they had a general idea of how, like, where they wanted it to go. And that's it.
It's improv, but like not good improv. Be like, oh yeah, look, we helped them improv. And they were like, guys, we're going to improv the whole script. And everyone's like, I don't know what improv is. And they just
never done it. Dark brown plastic office.
What even is that?
So what I'm trying to kind of extrapolate in my head is like, I feel like in the 70s, a lot of offices were like, the aesthetic was a darker brown color, but the plastic part I don't get. I think wood paneling or wood, but plastic?
Yes, that's what I'm like. What? You could have just said dark brown offices and that would have made sense, but then you had to throw in the word plastic.
Also, I feel like if you just said dark brown office, it would have been like, why does that even matter? There was no way that line could have made it, and that should have been rewritten, like overhaul that one, because...
After that, the note, I'm going through my notes, and the note that I took right after that is, I don't think this movie makes a lick of sense, is my note immediately following that. And then, after that comment, Kittredge finally does closes the camp, and Kelly turns to the one press guy that we've seen throughout, like, part of this movie, and he's like, that includes the press, mister. And the reporter's like, people have the right to know. And he's like, well, you've got your story. The story's about greed. I don't want him to go to Washington. I'm feeling sorry for myself.
There's that AI again.
Yes, it's like throwing words together that I was fine up until that point, and then he had to throw in, I'm feeling sorry for myself. Like,
so much of this episode is just going to be why? Why?
Well, can we talk about the ending before? I want to talk a little bit about the reception and the director, but I would love to talk about the ending because the ending is truly incredible, involving a helicopter and two men with some guns, and the most incredibly horrible editing between a real bear and a man in a bear suit I've ever seen.
And like a grenade launcher?
Yes, a grenade launcher. Yeah, so there's... it's like they're in the helicopter chasing the bear, and he gets... the pilot. What the fuck?
Stover.
The pilot gets really close to the bear, and he's like, have faith, friend. And then it just all goes... Like, he tries to land, they open the door, and the bear, a man in a bear suit with, like, bright, shining eyes, is just in the door. And then, like, intercutting... Now, and like the editing is incredible because you can totally tell that what was shot with like the bear not with people, and then when they spliced it all together, and then the helicopter spinning in a circle, and it's Just chaos reigns this ending.
Stober gets thrown from it. He has his gun with 2 bullets. He shoots, somehow misses the bear, then starts to use it as a bat. The bear chases after them, has a showdown, and then Kelly starts shooting his rifle at the bear and then grabs the bazooka and shoots it.
Yeah, what? Why do you have it? That was what I was like, why the fuck do you have a bazooka? Like, that seems like a lot.
When did it get there? And also, why didn't they use it in the first place? I mean, if you have it.
The reason why it's there, and this kills me, is that we start to learn a little bit about Stober's backstory, about how he fought in Nam, and he uses some really racist terms about how like he was having to shoot these people, and the body count got so much that he had to basically disassociate what he was doing, and he's like, and now I'm back in the thick of things. It's basically like what I got from it. And what kills me is that earlier there's a moment where the 3 men are sharing a moment, sort of like in Jaws, but instead of having like this really powerful story that Quint tells about the Indianapolis and the sharks in the water, he's telling a story about a group of indigenous people who are murdered by a bear. And then he makes a comment about how, what was the line? But is basically like suggesting that he was one of the indigenous people.
Yeah.
You know, a normal thing for you to say about anything.
Because he's like, that he was one of the indigenous people that was murdered by the bear. Or that survived the bear mauling. And I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, I had totally forgotten about that part. I think probably dissociated that part out.
And it's just so funny because we're talking about it and saying oh, this is so funny, this is so weird, because there's not a lot of substance to this movie. It's hard to discuss a lot of things here because it's so obviously the surface level version of what Jaws was doing and talking about bureaucracy and law enforcement and all of this interesting stuff and about the environment. And here it's we saw Jaws and got it, but just the aesthetics, we didn't actually understand why it was so good. And then you're watching it and you're just well, that's all this is, with a little bit more misogyny in it. And by a little bit, a lot more misogyny in it.
What happened to Allison?
Thank you, because I was excited at the beginning. I'm like, okay, cool. So Allison's getting introduced at the beginning here, so she's going to be one of our main characters, and she just disappears.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the rest of the script. It's utter chaos. People come and go, and most of the lines have nothing to do with the line that came before it.
So there's this whole discussion with Allison and Kelly where she's she wants to come on the trip, and she's a photographer and she wants to go and find this bear, and he's telling her, no, I'm not going to have you in danger. And she's like, you don't get to tell me that. It's almost as if we're going to do sort of a yay women feminist thing. But then he's again with the lines, I don't feel like playing little boy girl games.
Oh, I hate that line.
Ew.
And then he kisses her or gives her a peck, sort of. And I'm like, wait, when did y'all's relationship?
It was the most unsexiest kiss I've ever seen in my entire life. It was 2 pieces of rock hitting each other and bouncing away. So unsexy. I was like, this is the most I've seen some bad movies, but this is one of the most unconvincing relationships. They're trying to have this, look, they're so funny and stubborn and butting heads because she's a stubborn lady, likes to speak her mind, and he doesn't like it when ladies speak their mind. And I was like, nope, I don't think this is doing what you think it is.
Yeah. I mean, no character in that film really had any sort of chemistry with the other.
No. They had all met, they're all strangers. They had literally just met that day on set and had never spoken before a day in their lives.
I do want to give a shout out to Gail, the other woman character in this. Do you even remember Gail? Because I would understand if you don't. But she is one of the park rangers who is introduced and she just can't stop smiling. The entire time she's on screen, she is just smiling the entire fucking time. She shows up and she's like, I wouldn't miss a Kelly briefing. And then she just has this smile the entire time. And she's the one person that, of course, has to get naked and skinny dip in the waterfall and gets murdered there. But the entire time she is walking around as if she's trying to stay in character the entire time. And it's she can't, can't stop smiling. I'm on film.
And her stripping to go into the waterfall while she's on duty.
Well, I love that the line was basically like, I'm going to go soak. She's like, I'm going to go soak my feet. And then she gets topless.
My feet.
Oh my God, listeners, I wish you could just see a very fat dick.
For your eyes only.
When she gets attacked, the bear's arms like come out of the waterfall and like pull back into the waterfall, and it's like clearly a man. Like
18-foot bears hiding behind that waterfall, and she didn't notice.
Yeah, they're like not subtle creatures. Like they are like stinky and gross and loud. Like that's incredible.
I think also that's one of the parts where they had bear cam, and the bear had started out like not behind the waterfall.
Yeah.
So it would be literally impossible for the bear to go behind the waterfall without them noticing. There's just
literally
no
impossible.
way.
It would have been so fun if this movie was just a dude in a bear, was literally a man in a bear suit being a serial killer, and they discover that it is literally a scary man living in a cave and like is killing women. That would be fun. Not fun, but I think that would be interesting.
If the guy in the deer pelt ended up being the person in the bear suit, and he's secretly the killer.
Cool. Oh my God.
Because he's already wearing pelts.
And then there's this epic showdown, and instead of like Kelly killing him, a real bear comes out of nowhere and kills him, and then all was right with nature and the universe. And the bear, like, just one of those really weird human animal moments where they acknowledge each other solemnly and move on.
With a solemn nod.
Doctor, and then they continue on their way.
We did it.
I'm rewriting Grizzly.
What we're talking about right now, though, makes completely 110,000 times more sense than what was on film, to be perfectly honest.
It says something about the material that we're talking about when we can just come up with a hypothetical situation that's way better.
Just sitting here pulling shit out of our ass, and it's like, this is so much better than anything that was on celluloid in this movie.
I feel like we could walk away from this with something really viable on our hands, guys.
I mean, I think we're making a found footage bear attack movie. I think that's kind of what we're going to do with this now.
I'm into it.
My favorite point, and this just like popped in my head, is the hunters. So there's these drunk hunters, and they're out in the woods chasing down after this bear, which is, of course, again, a plot point from Jaws, which we're going to keep going back to while we discuss this.
Can you imagine even putting a gun in near your hand when you're drunk? Like, no. I can't even imagine holding a gun now as a person. Like, in general, guns scare the shit out of me. But drunken hunters is the most terrifying thing. It's scarier than any bear. It's a drunken hunter.
Yeah,
Jesus
you get Dick
Christ.
Cheney.
Yeah.
It's more common than you think where I'm from.
Yeah, it was super common. No, it is super common because I learned that after I worked on a show that took place in a very rural area. And like, oh yeah, like hunting while drunk is like a common thing. I was like, that's fucking insane to me. That's wild.
Like my dad would get ready to hunt, and like the first thing that he would do is load up a cooler that he can carry with him in the woods.
It's like a manly thing to do, like to go hang out and drink beers and shoot animals.
Yeah,
sorry,
so
this is not meant to be an anti-gun, anti-hunting podcast. Sorry, guys.
I know, and we're about to get flooded with so much hate mail because of all the right-wingers who listen to this podcast.
Grizzly.
Yeah, because of Grizzly. Canceled over 1976 creature feature Grizzly. Honestly, I welcome it with open arms.
But so there's this one hunter that's going off on his own, and that's the first time we see the bear. We actually see the bear on camera, and the hunter drops his gun immediately instead of like shooting it or whatever, and starts running. And while the bear is grunting, he is runting. I don't know, but there's a shot, and this shot just like kills me. Of the hunter is running, and he leaps from a rock to a very thin tree that is literally maybe, I don't know, 7 to 8 feet off the ground, and slides down the tree and goes, ow, because he hits something on it. And then he takes off running again and like falls into water with a Jesus, like falling into the water, where he is then washed away to safety. But I was like, this is the energy I want this movie to have, because this is silly as fuck.
He slides down the tree like it's like one of those fireman poles. That he like goes around it.
And I was like, dude, you literally could have jumped off that rock. Like, that rock ain't that high.
No.
Ooh, like a Scooby-Doo ass shit.
Ow!
Zoinks!
But okay, so director's William Girdler, and William Girdler was known for directing blaxploitation films. He directed Abby. He's a white guy, but he directed Abby, which was sued by Warner Brothers for kind of ripping off The Exorcist. So we have that. We have this movie that is obviously a ripoff of Jaws. There was a quote I found on IMDb where he was mentioning how people called him the ripoff king, and he only made 9 movies in his career because he passed away shortly after making The Manitou. He died in a helicopter crash, like right after filming that. It had nothing to do with the movie, but right after finishing filming The Manitou, he perished in a helicopter crash. But he had 9 movies in like the 70s that he made in like between 72 and 78. So he made like 9 movies in 6 years and then was no more. But like, I remember back in 2019, I think it's the Knoxville Horror Fest did a Girdler-thon where they did like 3 movies of Girdlers, and one of them was The Manitou, one was Grizzly, and one was Abby. And then the year after that, the sequel to Grizzly, which was being made in the 80s, and it has an opening scene with George Clooney, Laura Dern, and Charlie Sheen were in this movie. That movie was being made in the 80s and never got finished because it was being filmed in Hungary, but apparently one of the producers fled with the money. The Hungarian government seized most of the equipment for non-payment of bills, and then
did they seize the bear?
Well, so here's the thing. They didn't finish the movie because they were going to shoot this animatronic bear back in the States. But then the animatronic bear did not work. So most of the stuff that they had filmed was a man in a bear suit in Hungary because, again, they were going to have this animatronic bear that didn't work, and then no one had money to finish it. And so it never got finished. There was like VHS work prints of that film that people had found. And then back in 2020, it was finally finished. Someone came up, found all of the like bits and pieces of it, and somehow made a movie. And it also premiered at Knox Horror Fest in 2020.
That explains a lot because I saw that there was a sequel, Grizzly 2, and it was listed as 2020. And I was like, well, there's no fucking way that's true. And so now it's all coming together because the screenshot that I saw was of like a frightened Charlie Sheen.
Mm-hmm. And all 3 of their names are on the poster, and they're only in it for like what, like 5-10 minutes.
They're killed in the opening scene.
Yeah. Very Scream of them.
Amazing. I feel like I should watch this now.
I kind of wanted to. I wanted to watch it before we recorded, and then I just didn't. But I've heard it's terrible. But
well, obviously,
I know that is a shocking revelation to you all.
Well, you know what the fucking shocking revelation was to me? That this movie made $39 million in the box office. Like, that to me, it was made for, Wikipedia says $750,000, which is pretty low for a movie. And in 1976, it made $39 million, which is crazy pants to me. Like that ratio is wild. Like, this is not a movie I would have expected to do well at the box office, but maybe they were right ripping off of Jaws, because that had to be a huge part of why it did so well.
Oh, absolutely.
For what this is.
Yeah.
There's one other thing I want to talk about very briefly, is that there was a tie-in novelization that came out, I want to say I think it was published around the same time as the film came out. And it gave several specific reasons as to why the grizzly bear started killing and eating humans. One, it grew too fast, and so its mother drove it off before it knew how to hunt properly. It injured its jaw before entering the park, thus causing it serious pain.
See, I thought you said it started its job. I'm like, what are you talking about? It
injured its jaw.
It's like, he's a little business bear.
Eddie the business bear.
And the reason why he got a taste, this is the part. I cannot wait to see your faces. The reason why he got a taste for human blood was that his first victim was a menstruating woman.
As if...
Honest.
What?
Their menstruation attracts bears. I almost applaud it for going that far. Like, I almost want to, like, be impressed, but I'm not, because it's probably terribly done. But,
There's a part of me that's also like, at least the book gave reasons.
That's also fair.
Because the movie is just, this bear just started doing this.
I would have loved to hear a movie in which those men, who are supposed to be like the pinnacle of masculinity, say the word menstruation at least 3 times. That would have been an incredible experience.
Oh.
Wow.
They would have whispered it. They would have been like,
That's...
"Well, Chief, she was menstruating."
Menstruating!
That's actually what kills them. It's not the bear.
Oh my god. But I also see that Grizzly was the top grossing independent film of the year and held the record until Halloween came out in 78. What? Isn't that crazy?
It's
That's
so
crazy
bananas. It's so bananas.
I can't wrap my brain around it at all. Because, like, so many movies better than this have made so much less.
It's also like, I mean, as far as I can tell, like, pretty much forgotten movie. Like, people don't talk about this movie. Like, it's like very, very niche, you know?
Because Terry had the Blu-ray, but you got it as part of the pack. Yeah, I was going to say you have it, but you had never seen it.
I had never seen it. It was Severin put it out, and they did like a nature attack thing, and I got the package because I wanted one of the shark movies, because I'm obsessed with really bad shark movies. And it was included in that package, and that movie was included. And then I also found out when I was right before we started recording that Day of the Animals, which was again another Girdler film, that was another nature attack film, was also included in that package. So I have both Grizzly and his follow-up Day of the Animals in my Blu-ray collection behind me that I completely did not realize I had.
It just so happened.
It just so happened.
One other thing, at the very end when they launched the grenade launcher, the bear explodes essentially.
Like it's a car or something?
There's literally, like it's a car, and there's literally nothing left.
No blood.
There's nothing. It explodes, and then it's empty field.
But the explosion is so obviously CGI too. Like, it looks like a planet exploding in Star Wars. Like, the explosion is like so obviously not like a realistic explosion in any stretch of the imagination.
It's
that
like
his bones are incinerated.
Yeah, it was vaporized. It was like, there's nothing left. It doesn't like amble around, screaming, like you want that. That's what you
and there's
want.
no like blood, and like at least in Jaws, at least like you get a realistic explode. Like, it explodes, but there's a fucking reason it explodes, and you get like the actual look of the explosion, and it's pretty gross. Like, you see the gnarly.
I was actually waiting for like a moment when he was sitting there afterwards to like blood just like drop on him. I was like waiting for something, because he was really close to the bear when it blew up, but there's literally nothing. There was literally nothing.
See, that would have been funny, and they didn't know they were making a funny movie.
They ran out of ketchup. That's probably what happened.
Yeah.
Ketchup and bacon.
Oh.
They used it too much.
There ain't nothing like a movie that ends with an explosion of something and everyone gets showered in guts and blood. Like, at least just give me that. Even if it's just like water that's dyed red, at least show me something.
It's just someone standing off camera with a bucket, and it's coming from like the bottom, and it like sloshes up, and you're like, yes, that's all I wanted. I don't care. It's coming from the wrong direction.
Who cares? Yeah, put Kool-Aid in it. You can just dump some Kool-Aid in there, and it'll be kind of red. You can color correct it. It's fine.
I'm so glad that I could bring this movie to you guys. and just
we have talked about it longer than the movie is, and almost longer than the movie is, and I love that. And we've just been roasting it too. Like we have just roasting.
So, my final question before we wrap up, May, is that this movie terrified you as a kid to the point that you stopped watching it and you had not revisited it until this week. Did this movie terrify you as an adult?
I mean, there are aspects of it that are terrifying for completely different reasons. But mostly, yeah, it's a comedy, isn't it? That's what it is. It's a misogynist comedy.
My favorite.
My favorite.
Yeah.
My favorite flavor of comedy. Well, y'all, do we want to wrap this up and give this our ratings out of 5?
Oh boy, yes, let's.
So, Terry, how many lopped off limbs out of 5 do you give Grizzly?
Oh my god, we didn't even talk about the poor kid that loses his leg.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of lopped off limbs.
Speaking of lopped off limbs.
That was my favorite part of the movie, actually, because it was like, oh, we're killing... No, we didn't kill a kid.
I know.
Because he gets saved, but like... I thought that kid was dead. I like rewound it a few times. I was like, what? Because it's like such a brief moment. Like you could tell that they wanted to film longer, but they probably had to cut it for MPAA shit, you know? But I was like, wow, this kid is losing his leg. And that is fantastic. And then his mom gets crushed in a bear hug. How many times did this monster just bear hug people? Like,
yeah, the
it
waterfall.
Was a lot.
Yeah. Death by crushing.
Death by crushing.
That sounds like a horrendous way to die.
Yeah.
They should have leaned into that.
They really should. There's a lot they should have leaned in. Like, pick a direction and lean hard into it. Just something. Okay, so lopped off limbs out of 5. This movie is not good. This movie is probably like, I'm going to take 1.5 lopped off limbs, to be perfectly honest. I think that I think you mentioned this, May, earlier, how if you were in a theater full of people that knew what they were getting themselves into and the alcohol was flowing and people were just having a good time, this would be a fantastic film because it is so ridiculous. I almost wish someone would take like a Rocky Horror Picture Show set to this and have people acting out the dialogue in front, because the dialogue in this is just chef's kiss bad. It is the opposite of what you should do in a movie. And I applaud it for making such inane, nonsensical word use. it kills me, but it's not a good movie. And somehow for a movie that is 91 minutes long feels longer than Jaws, which I don't, again, does not feel like a long movie, but is a long movie. It's almost 2 hours long. This movie feels like really long. And I think, May, you mentioned that you spaced out a couple times. I had to like rewind because I was like, shit, I'm not taking any notes because my mind just started wandering. But yeah, this movie's not good. But I am so glad that we were here to talk about this because this was a lot more fun than watching the movie. But what about you, Mary Beth? How many lopped off limbs?
It's like 1.5 for the movie and like 4 for like the experience of watching it and talking about it. You know what I mean? Like it's not well made. The dialogue is terrible. We talked about it, but like it's funny to watch. And I feel like this would be very fun to watch with friends and like talking about it. It's hilarious. And I know it's not the point of the movie, but I feel like I enjoyed the experience of both watching it and talking about it. Like watching it by myself, I was watching it while I was working and I was just muttering to myself, like, what is this? What? And I honestly applaud your movie if you can make me verbalize that. Like, even if it's bad, I still applaud you for eliciting like an actual reaction out of me like that. Like, I'll always respect it. It might not be for good reasons, but you know what? You got me to really emotionally engaged with your work, so that's something.
I even question everything.
But May, you have the final word. How many lopped off limbs out of 5 do you give Grizzly?
I give it 1 lopped off limb, and that's just to represent the first kill, the lopped off arm. I just wanted to pay tribute to that.
All right.
Yeah.
It's like the most gore that you really get out of it.
It really is.
That arm.
And it's really just thrown so quickly, and like it just really does look like a fake arm that they just put a little bit of blood on the edge. It didn't even really look like a torn off arm. It just looks like
it looks like a boomerang.
Someone threw a boomerang and filmed it in slow motion. That is what it looked like.
One boomerang.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much, May, for bringing this wild-ass movie to us so we could talk about it, because this was a whole lot of fun. Where can our listeners find you, and what do you have coming up that you'd like to share?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MayMurrayXO. I also have a website, maymurray.net, that I need to be a lot better updating. And next, I'm going to be crowdfunding my big queer horror novel. So, yeah, donate to that.
Yeah, and listeners, we're going to put all of the links to the Kickstarter and to the book that you edited that just came out, Queer Saints, right? Yeah. It's like I had my notes and then they vanished, and I'm like trying to remember off of everything. But yes, so all of that notes will be like in our show notes, and I keep pointing down as if people can see it, and I keep doing that, and I don't know why that is a thing now.
I love it. It's incredible.
Go in our show notes, so go support that Kickstarter, please.
Yes, please. So everyone, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with Grizzly? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thanks everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there. Most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children? Oh. Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children!
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.